Previously on the lunch counter, we considered what it means to be Canadian. From food to clothing, the Fraser Valley is as varied and unique as its citizens. In part 2 of our Canadian culture exploration, we continue our discussion on the distinction, preservation, and development of our cultural mosaic.
I'd say it's pretty hard to keep your culture, but I mean, as long as you kind of keep true to what you think your culture is, then I think you're doing okay. So I don't know, I definitely westernized in some ways, but I think as long as we keep helping everyone younger than us and stuff, we should be okay. We don't sway from it too much.
I'd say, times are always changing, so it's hard to kind of keep the culture you have, but you also want to embrace what you have and then embrace times changing, because, it's always going to be different and you're going to have to adjust to it.
Oh, we're definitely all becoming westernized. That's just a given. But, you try and keep what you can, as long as you can. But, it's not forever.
If anything, I think sometimes the problem is the exact opposite, that we're not bringing everything together, that we're so worried about becoming westernized or homogenized that we're not willing to mix everything up and really work together sometimes. And I think sometimes we need to it's important to remember the past or your culture, but also to kind of let go of that fear of becoming too westernized and be willing to let everything kind of just mix. If it's a heritage that's important to you, it's going to come out. It's going to influence how you live.
But again, Hoger made a huge point. Culture isn't fixed in time. It's very fluid. It's always changing. So, that's part of culture, is that if everyone kind of agrees that, okay, well, this is where it's going, and then things get left aside.
But I also think for myself as a family coming over, you've got your WASPs, right? Your white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. So coming to Canada, the language, I think German and English go back to have certain roots, a lot of similar words. Religious, the Anglican Church, the Lutheran Church aren't that far apart. Skin color, mannerisms, there's a lot of things. When my parents came to Canada, language aside, there was already quite a lot of overlap. And maybe for the First Nations group, there was a lot of things very different. And the same with a group, let's say from India or from Hong Kong, there's a lot of differences. Whereas I think coming from Northern Europe to Canada, there's a lot of the values that Canada had embraced. I think the Northern Europeans actually fit into that quite nicely, which is maybe making it more confusing for the people that are coming this way now that are...
And which is why Canada actively recruited immigration from... Unfortunately, it looks like it's going the other direction. You look in the news right now, and most countries around the world are starting to see significant rises in nationalist political parties. We're seeing it in Greece, and it's very, us and everybody out. Yeah, it is. It's an us and them. It's creating the other, right? And we're seeing that all over the place now. So this kind of ideal, you would love to think that maybe a global culture, or even that we could all recognize diversity, but people are always looking for somebody to blame, and as economies collapse, that seems to be where some of the blame's falling right now.
Sure. Well, and I also think it goes back to somewhere in the beginning of the conversation where we mentioned and talked about the fact that different cultures coming together and sort of becoming this melting pot, there's going to be the pros and the cons of that. And some of the cons might be that you can't differentiate between somebody, or for somebody like you having to reach so far back to find a distinctive part of yourself that has an actual foothold in a culture and in a country and in a language, right? But you've been able to pull from so many different cultures, and you've been able to maybe more readily identify with many different cultures and be able to glean the best of those different worlds and what they had to offer.